Jeremiah is experiencing. He's not like the times when, Israel's king was on the throne and they were conquering nations. Jeremiah is living in a world where elections have happened and they have lost, to put it in a metaphor. Again, I want to read this paragraph. I don't feel like I need to defend Jeremiah.
We're at 3?
Yeah, we're at 3. I'm going to read the introduction paragraph. In the end, Jeremiah emerges as God's suffering servant, not unlike 2nd Isaiah's servant of the Lord. This is the part. Jeremiah endures enormous hardship at the hands of his enemies. He faces scorn and humiliation. He suffers unjustly and in solidarity with the poor, and does not cower, though his life is endangered. As a representative of a war-torn people, Jeremiah testifies, and this is the gold, I think, that suffering is neither shameful nor a sign of divine displeasure, but rather it is an indication of one's devotion to God. This unifying portrayal of Jeremiah organizes the texts that seemingly are all dissonant and disconnected to each other. So it doesn't prove that God is angry, and it's not a test, but if you endure the suffering and remain faithful, meaning you continue to believe and trust in God, then it just indicates that you're devoted to God. That's all. It's part of the journey.
When
One more day.
you mentioned suffering, though, I think of the idea that you have to be a martyr. You have to physically suffer through something for God to bless you. And I'm thinking now we're really talking about the emotional and physical, psychological suffering that we go through with so much stuff. It's not just the physical.
Yeah.
That the idea that with I can't remember what it was called when you have the stigmata. That made you a holy person.
Yeah.
That if you had, it looked like you had been on the cross as well. That was proof that you had suffered. But there's many kinds of suffering.
Yeah, and I think in Jeremiah's world, it's not a suffering he celebrates. He doesn't, he's hurt, he's angry, he's beaten down, and describes himself that way, but he doesn't make himself a martyr. He's not, look at me, I'm suffering, and I still believe in God, and so my faith must be stronger than anybody else's. He's simply bearing witness. They mentioned in that introduction the concept of the suffering servant. And without going into all the detail, there was a motif in Jewish faith that it was pretty clear that the people of God were never going to obey God. They were never going to do what God wanted them to do. They were always going to turn in lack of faith. But that God always makes a way. And so the way was, there would always be at least one person who would remain faithful to God. And that one person's faithfulness, I'll use a word I never use anywhere else, would be imputed to all the people. So that by and they call that person the suffering servant. Now sometimes it was thought of as one person, but more often it's a group of people. And that they're suffering, they're not suffering to prove, I don't know, in the end, why do people have to suffer in the world? Right? There's my question to God. Really? Why? Why is suffering so essential to the structure of life? You made everything else beautiful and complex and works all together. Why? Except for when the bear gets eaten by the bear, I knew where you were going.
Tell that to the animals out there what it is. It's life. You're going to encounter suffering, whether you are the one who suffers extreme physical pain or mental pain, or you just have a life where, oh, you know, today what happened? Oh, the car broke down, or, you know, the everyday crap of life. We all encounter these kinds of things. And God didn't say everybody will have, you know, a carefree life. That's
No.
just not possible. If you're a realist, you know, it's going to happen. And, you know, people die. People in our lives die. God didn't single us out for that, I don't believe. It's just what it is. And if you can remain faithful to the mission in the face of all that, great or small suffering, I say, yay to you. I mean, it's got to be difficult.
I think there's suffering that comes with life, cancer, you know, old age, and dying, and losing people that you love. Jeremiah's struggling with suffering that is brought about by the evil intentions of other people. He's talking about
Just magical
gulags.
stuff.
You know, he's talking about the rounding up of people and executing them because of their faith and their commitment. That is suffering that is directly related to the choice one human being to another, torture.
Exactly.
And so he's struggling with, how do I remain faithful when I see that kind of suffering brought about in the world? And you know, I don't, like I said, when I tell the stories of Appalachia, you know, there are people that would love to tell the story. We had a couple of adults that went along on these trips, and honestly, if I'd have known, I would have left them home, because they came into Appalachia with judgment. They came believing these people were lazy,
Yes.
but the only reason they didn't have houses and they didn't have 2 cars and a garage was because they just never got up in the morning and went to work. And it's like a hard shell around these adults. And you want to say, open your eyes and then open your ears to realize the suffering that you are seeing is caused by selfish, self-centered people who made themselves rich from their suffering.
People don't want to see reality sometimes, even when it's right in front of them. It upsets their world to admit that maybe something that you are a part of is making other people suffer.
Yeah. I think that is hard, isn't it? I mean, it's hard.
Well, that's why they want to wipe out history in so many of the schools, because we don't want our children to feel bad.
There's a,
I want my children not to do the same things that have happened before. I want them to learn from history that that's not the way to live. And if you don't hear it, then
yeah, how do you steer away from it if you don't look at it and regret it? And say, gee,
realize
why did we do this?
there are consequences to everything. You talked about, but look at what happened after World War II. And the VA mortgages were given to the soldiers, but where were they? They had to be outside the cities, the urban areas, and it meant that all the whites then got the mortgages and they fled the cities. So we became a more segregated city or country than ever. And, it sounds good. Well, we'll give them a mortgage, or we'll give them this, or give them that. But what does it do to the people that are excluded?
Sometimes acts that seem good on the
Right.
surface have bad consequences down the line.
And sometimes you can't see those consequences, like good intentions, right? They say good intentions paves the road to hell. But, but I still feel like good intentions, you have to start with good intentions,
Right.
but then pay attention along the way.
There's got to be accountability along the way, yeah.
Give credit for good intentions, but good intentions don't finish the job. And sometimes unintended consequences rise up. In fact, more often than not, unintended consequences are a major struggle to, and in humility, it's hard for us to embrace them. You say, well, that's not what I intended, and I'm a good person, and all that. Well, okay, nobody's arguing that, but look at what's happening.
And try and do something.
Yeah, change your
to
way.
remedy that. Is it really going to hurt you that much to share some of what the blessings that you have? Be a blessing? Isn't that the mission? But for some people, they just, they don't see it that way. I worked hard for this. I don't, my mistakes that were made a generation or two before, I was here has nothing to do with me. So things don't get done. I keep thinking of it. His first name is Vladimir Karamirza. They said, why are you continuing? You've seen what he said when he left. One of the guards said to him, be careful what you eat.
No.
They've already poisoned him twice.
Right.
So he's still, for the rest of his life, got to worry about, somebody coming after him, no matter where he ends up. Those are the people like Jeremiah that won't keep their mouths shut.
Yeah, that is a Jeremiah example. What that guy is doing, what he is living out, is a Jeremiah example. He's not purposefully trying to suffer, but he's going to breathe in and breathe out and show that the world in which he lives is causing suffering. He bears witness to it. And it's suffering that can be changed.
Yeah.
It's not like...
They don't have to sacrifice all their young men to an unjust war. That's the big thing now.
Yeah.
But everybody's afraid to say anything. He said, if you speak out, you're either dead or you're in jail. There's no way to, so most people are not going to do that. There are a few, though. You need to think, are you crazy? But no, they're not crazy. They're just brave people who believe in the mission. Anyway, I couldn't do it. I'd say, is there a way I can send a little check or, and not have to get dirty or...
I don't know. I think you underestimate yourself. I do. I think you underestimate yourself. I think we don't know what we would do until we get in that, until we get in a situation where we're forced to make a decision like that. And maybe, I don't know, maybe most of us would just go along to get along or do something like that. But I don't know. There's something that operates within us because we are people of faith. That we just, it's not really possible to pretend all of a sudden that it doesn't matter. I think.
Yeah, I get that. It's just we haven't really faced some of the stuff, and you just never know until you are. We may find out. I'm hoping not. But, yeah.
Well, I know it's radical thinking and predicting a future that you can't see, but I see a future coming that if the trends of what is popular among half the nation move more into power, I see churches finally again becoming sanctuaries for people who disagree. People who are organizing and ready to say, no, we're not living in the world that way. We're going to be in here, we're going to be organizing, and we're going to be resisting. I think the church could easily become a pinnacle of resistance. And I'm not just talking about the Christian church. I'm talking about the Muslim people of faith. I'm talking about Jewish people of faith. People who are going to say, no, we're not going to do that. You're not going to do this. And I don't know, is the structure of our government, will it allow the creation of a Hitler-type dictator who can actually force us to do what we don't want to do? I don't know.
There's enough of us saying, you can't arrest us all.
Yeah.
But that, I think, works. But, there's always a few brave souls that are out there in the forefront who, get pushed out of windows or imprisoned. or-
Yeah, and what we depend upon is the law. We
Right.
depend upon the law. And so this particular politician has defamed and corrupted the law.
Exactly.
And he has gone after the one thing that would hold him and everybody else accountable.
It's scary.
So,
I mean, he
you
is
know,
not accountable now.
No, he's
He's
corroded
been
it
made a
all.
king because, and they've been working on this long before Trump. I mean, Trump is not the mastermind.
No, he's not.
This, they had the patience to keep, chipping away at these institutions. And now there's a lot of, judges that are horrible. I wouldn't want to have to appear before them. They're just, thank God that I think there's still more that are not like that.
Yeah,
But is it only a matter of time?
I hope not.
And the guy who was in charge of the voting regulations
In Georgia?
in Georgia,
Yeah,
he's a Republican,
yeah,
but he's not afraid to say, this is corrupt.
yeah.
We can't have
Yep.
this. There's still people pushing back, and it may still hold. They may overturn those laws they tried to jam through like 30 days out from a major election. I mean, really?
Yeah, and the gist of what I understand they're doing is they're saying, well, the state house gets to appoint the electors, right? And so they're gonna watch to see how the popular vote goes. And then they're gonna poll the electors, and if the electors don't cast their vote for the people that the state government wants them to vote for, they're gonna eliminate that group of electors and put another group in.
Right, and then now they want you to hand count, what century will the vote be done? It's so unreliable.
And how would that be any more reliable? Because,
Right.
you know,
Who's count?
2 for me, 1 for you. 2 for me, 1 for you. This is the oldest trick in the book.
Yeah, and they're trying it, but I can't think of his name, but he has had,
You're
That's
right
right.
here.
death threats and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Disruptions to his family, and still, Raffensperger, that's his
Right.
name.
Good for
He's-
you, remembering that name.
Well, memory.
Yeah.
But, yeah, there are people like that that still stand up for what's right. Let's hope they prevail.
Yeah.
All I do is sit back and send emails to everybody else.
It's something, you're doing something.
Well, let's see what Jeremiah has to say in chapter 3.
Oops, I gotta get the right chapter. Guess it's me to read today?
I think so.
Yes.
If a man divorces his wife and she goes from him and becomes another man's wife, will he return to her? Would not such a land be greatly polluted? You have prostituted yourself with many lovers, and would you return to me, says the Lord? Look up to the bare heights and see where you have not been lain with. By the waysides you sat waiting for lovers, like a nomad in the wilderness. You have polluted the land with your prostitutions and wickedness. Therefore the showers have been withheld, and the spring rain has not come. Yet you have the forehead of a prostitute. You refuse to be ashamed. Have you not just now called to me, my father? You are the friend of my youth. Will he be angry forever? Will he be indignant to the end? This is how you have spoken, but you have done all the evil that you could. The Lord said to me in the days of King Josiah, have you seen what she did, that faithless one, Israel? How she went up on every high hill and under every green tree and prostituted herself there? And I thought, after she has done all this, she will return to me. But she did not return, and her false sister Judah saw it She saw that for all the adulteries of that faithless one, Israel, I had sent her away with a decree of divorce, yet her false sister Judah did not fear, but she also went and prostituted herself. Because she took her prostitution so lightly, she polluted the land, committing adultery with stone and tree. Yet for all this, her false sister Judah did not return to me with her whole heart, but only in pretense, says the Lord. Then the Lord said to me, faithless Israel has shown herself less guilty than false Judah. Go and proclaim these words toward the north, and say, return, faithless Israel, says the Lord. I will not look upon you in anger, for I am merciful, says the Lord. I will not be angry forever. Only acknowledge your guilt, that you have rebelled against the Lord your God, and scattered your favors among strangers under every green tree, and have not obeyed my voice, says the Lord. Return, O faithless children, says the Lord, for I am your husband. I will take you, one from a city and two from a family, and I will bring you to Zion. I will give you shepherds after my own heart, who will feed you with knowledge and understanding. And when you have multiplied and increased in the land, in those days, says the Lord, they shall no longer say, the ark of the covenant of the Lord, it shall not come to mind, or be remembered or missed, nor shall another one be made. At that time Jerusalem shall be called the throne of the Lord, and all nations shall gather to it, to the presence of the Lord in Jerusalem, and they shall no longer stubbornly follow their own evil will. In those days the house of Judah shall join the house of Israel, and together they shall come from the land of the north to the land that I gave your ancestors for a heritage. I thought, how would I set you among my children and give you a pleasant land, the most beautiful heritage of all the nations? And I thought you would call to me, my father, and would not turn from following me. Instead, as a faithless wife leaves her husband, so you have been faithless to me, O house of Israel, says the Lord. A voice on the bare heights is heard, the plaintive weeping of Israel's children, because they have perverted their way. They have forgotten the Lord their God. Return, O faithless children, I will heal your faithlessness. Here we come to you, for you are the Lord our God. Truly the hills are a delusion, a tumult on the mountains. Truly in the Lord our God is the salvation of Israel. But from our youth, the shameful thing has devoured all for which our ancestors had labored, their flocks and their herds, their sons and their daughters. Let us lie down in our shame, and let our dishonor cover us, for we have sinned against the Lord our God, we and our ancestors, from our youth even to this day, and we have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God.
Well, what I want to know is what they do wrong.
Yeah, well, they're
Pollution.
worshiping on the hills, the mountains, to another god, I would assume, not,
Pollution also is mentioned several times.
So what does it mean? What does it mean that they went up in the hills and they worshiped another god?
Well, didn't the Samaritans worship on the hilltops? So,
But does worshiping another god involve, like, for the Hebrew people, worshiping God was supposed to involve a way of life. It wasn't just what you did on the high holy days. Worshiping God is supposed to involve acts of charity, living a life that recognizes that you're not the only people on the earth. All of that.
But that doesn't get mentioned in this
I know it
particular.
doesn't.
It's only talking of what seems to me the metaphor of a faithless wife going off with another husband. Well, if God is your husband and you've turned your back on God, it doesn't spell out
Like, what
how
is
they
that?
did
Yeah,
it.
what does that look like?
Yeah, and all the references to going up to the
The hills
hilltops.
and prostituting yourself under the green trees and all. Like,
Worshiping stones
yeah, I don't know,
and
what is
the
that, what
things
is
of
that?
nature.
Like, what does that look like? What have they done? I mean, first of all, I feel really bad for the image of women that, you know, that
Oh,
gets
yeah, well, that's always,
tossed around
the
this, you
usual.
know, it is
what's new?
very typical of that, you know, that,
Nothing is new under the sun.
yeah.
We cat women, we childless cattle.
But I wish I could go back in time and go and look and see for myself to say, what is Jeremiah really upset about? What is this prostitution that, you know, because in my Sunday school class growing up, it only amounted to, you said a prayer to the wrong God.
Right, you worship the stones, or you
Yeah,
worship
you went
the
up and you
trees.
stacked up stones and you made an
Nature.
idol, which is what the
Right.
Catholics do, and that's why the Catholics will never get into heaven. I
I
mean, we were told that.
think that's what this sounds like. It doesn't mention you have not fed the poor, you have not healed, tried to comfort the sick. It doesn't say any of that
Right,
in this particular passage.
right, but my wondering is that what Jeremiah is upset about? That they have destroyed, he says, you have squandered and wasted all of the blessings of the original arrival in the promised land. You've squandered them. You've lost them. You've turned to other gods. One of the ones that I hear coming through a lot is the idea, the importance of having children. And so instead of trusting God for the fertility of the people, they would turn then to the Canaanite gods of fertility. They would dance around the fertility poles. They would have, in fact, in one place, the translation that you had, I think, cleaned it up a little bit, and then he's complaining that they're having orgies.
Ashtaroth, was
Yeah,
along the coast.
but is that part of the metaphor? Is the idea of an orgy just that all my people are having sex with another god, or they're having sex with each other? Is it even about sex? I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either, and it specifically mentions one kingdom and the other. Israel is the worst, it's worse
That's
than
right.
Judah. So Israel had more Samaritans, right, at
Yeah.
the time?
That's right.
So maybe this is,
Well, and they're,
we
it's
don't like those
right.
people kind of
It's
thing.
two
huh?
children, right? Judah and Israel. And then will they ever come back to me? Is it possible ever that a woman who used to be married and a part of a family who went out and prostituted herself, is it possible that she could ever come back in and be purified, right? And be living the pure life again? What is he asking about? Isn't he asking, is it possible that Judah could break off its relationship of economic trade and all the other things they depend upon Egypt for? Is it possible that they could come back to trusting that God will provide for them if they would just come back and reunite with the north? Well, okay, so the south goes, no. Judah says, no way, not interested. And he goes to the north and finds a little more willingness in Israel, it's interesting. He says, it's not going to be about the Ark of the Covenant. It's not going to be all those things that used to be the glue that held us together.
Will be gone.
They'll be gone. You're not going to have those assurances. So then, what is it that will hold us together? It's just simply returning whatever life in that world looked like when you trusted God.
And that's what's not mentioned here, but could be implied.
Yeah.
So, the original blessing, which was care for your neighbors, and,
Yeah, don't cheat your neighbors. And what does it mean in the world today? Like, let's just imagine in the world today. I don't even know if I know this answer for my own self, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What does it mean? Could you identify a person who trusts God? What are the signs that a person who trusts God?
I don't know.
I mean, I think the first one might be,
I would have to know what's in their heart, and I don't know that.
well, but maybe
Why
even,
would you do
But
something?
their actions.
Their
Yeah.
actions may be what might make you think they trust God, but you
Yeah.
never know for
Yeah.
completely sure, because it could be, I'm showing off for.
Right, so they can pretend, but
Yeah.
what would be the marks? Like, what comes to my mind is, I don't know why, but it's, if you have an opportunity in your life to cheat as far as money and get away with it, person who trusts God will not do that, because taking that money and even getting away with it isn't necessary, because they trust God. And that's also where hospitality comes from. In the prayer of confession, in the service today, the writer wrote, "It's hard for us to share generously with each other because we worry we might need that someday."
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And so, yeah.
So how do we know? We don't know. And you know what? I'm glad I don't know. I don't want to
Well,
know.
what would the signs be? Not to apply
There
it to
are
a person.
signs when we can see that somebody's not doing.
Yeah.
But the signs that they are, what's in their heart and their mind, I don't know. And I don't, I
How
don't
about
want to
Jimmy
know.
Carter?
Yeah, how about Jimmy Carter?
You know what? He seems really close to the mark. He does.
Yeah, he trusts God.
And
There's
he
no
also
question.
admits to us in books that there are times
He
when I
screwed up.
didn't do the right thing.
Right.
Is there a human being, alive or dead, that has been completely?
Yeah, I don't even mean completely.
No.
I just mean
In
what
general.
what are the
The
signs?
majority,
Because you
more
know
than
what?
50%.
I grew up in a world that taught me that the sign that you trusted God was that you went to church.
Oh, yeah, well, no, we know that's not,
Do
people go to.
you? You think people now know that? You
I
think they?
hope people
I
know
don't.
the difference
No.
between showboats in the church who,
I just
are
mean
there
going to church.
for, it's good on their CV. I think you can tell sometimes about that.
So is going to church in any way a sign that a person trusts God?
Of course, but,
You really want to wipe the place out, empty
no one
it.
Of course it is. But, there are also other reasons to
Yeah, it's
come
a
to church.
component of it, right?
Yeah,
It's a
exactly.
component. It's not proof of anything,
It's a proof
but it's a
that's-
component of a life of trusting God.
Right.
So trusting God means that you won't trust other things. You trust God means that you're not going to trust that the key to a happy life is just a lot of money. That's the prostitution that he's talking about. He's talking about substituting whatever trusting God looks like. I don't know.
And holding fast to a community that supports that kind of a feel, that faith in God is a component of all our religious congregations.
Right.
But you know that there are some people who go to these places and their aim in going there is different. And thank God we don't know everybody's intention,
Motivations.
because it would be very upsetting. It's just,
But also, I think, even if they come for the wrong reasons, some people might show up to a gathering of worship, and they may come for the wrong reason. They may
and
come,
here's something.
and they might learn something. They might actually be infected. I had a gentleman in my church, my first church, who said, you're fighting a losing battle in the world we live in today. Because he said, when I was growing up, and you got a job at Ethicon or at Ortho, your boss was in church. And the other thing your boss did took note of whether you were in church or not. And so people talk about the glory days of the church.
Yeah, well,
And it's like, 1950, 1955, 1960, the attendance in church was phenomenal in the United States. Guess what it meant? It meant I'm doing what my boss wants me to do.
and then there's always going to be some of that.
Yeah, but maybe when they came, maybe through a sermon, maybe through a hymn that cuts through the callousness of us, we think to ourselves, my goodness, life is contained in learning to trust God in all of our ways. And the signs of that will be the kinds of, I saw a quote, these quotes flash by me now 100 times a day, but the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus preached contains absolutely nothing about what you must believe. It is full of what you must do.
Yeah.
So where is faith demonstrated? Trusting in God is demonstrated in what you do. It is. There's just no way around that. And so here Jeremiah is saying, look at what you're doing. You're doing nothing of what God or what people of faith would be likely to be caught doing. You're not. I don't know what they're doing up there under the pine trees.
Maybe they're just enjoying the shade, you know?
It could be. It could be also that
Jeremiah's wrong about some of this.
well, he uses the metaphor of sex, but I don't think it has any, it is more like, it is more like you've just taken what God has given you and you're just enjoying it.
Right.
Like eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And let's live that way. Let's let that be our life.
Don't think about the needs of others because you're not responsible.
Yeah, and don't worry about if injustice is happening all around you. Don't just close your eyes and ears and just go forward, right?
See no evil,
Yes.
speak no evil.
And don't worry at all of whether you are a part of a movement for God's love and grace for all people. Just forget about all that. That just makes life hard. And that's forgetting about God. That's the prostitution that people move into, to say, well, we didn't get what we have because God gave us blessings. We got what we have. Let's enjoy it. Let's take advantage of it while we can. And it's easy for me, I look over to the neighbor's fence. I was talking again with someone yesterday who was telling me about part of the devastation that's happened because of this storm is the loss of these yachts, these massive boats. And the person I was talking to comes from that life and was able to talk about the fact that people who have these massive yachts spend $300,000-$400,000 a year maintaining them. And it's like, really? Is there nothing? Are you that uncreative? There's nothing that you can think of that needs to be done in this world?
But you're giving people jobs by doing that.
Yes, that's the
But
argument.
to
No,
build
it's
those.
yeah, the building of
people
the ships
do it.
and people who work on those ships and jobs. That's right.
That is true.
That was the idea that
It's the trickle down theory.
Yeah, well, it's
rather
not
than
trickling. Like
It's a
the
drip down.
floodwaters on.
drip, drip, drip.
Right. But then there are people like, the Gates Foundation, and
Oh, yeah.
they take a good chunk of their money and make it do good in the world too. So you can't paint all the billionaires with the same
No.
brush, and wealth is, what do you do with it? Wealth is not bad. It's just, what are you doing with your wealth? Are you trying to have as many yachts as you can? Because you've got a yacht builder work plan? Is that what your motivation is? Or, are you taking some of that money and putting it back in the community? I'm glad I don't have a lot. Because this temptation has to be tremendous.
Well, I think that the challenge becomes, just like Jeremiah is saying, large or small, what are you doing with the blessings that you have received in your life? I mean, a poor man can enact a life-changing event in the life of another person. So can a rich person. And equally, they can defy the truth of who they are. They can do just as much damage. A poor person can do as much damage as a wealthy person can. And what Jeremiah is arguing is, come back to the Lord. Come back to the truth that you are hewn out of, you are cut out of the mold of a God who cares and loves all people. So come back home. Come and let's begin again the ministry of blessing to all the families of the earth. And what he gets is an absolute resounding no. Like, not interested. This is too much fun. This is the life we want to live.
Well, also, when they're talking about Judah and Israel, isn't that similar to when you preach Sunday about us versus them?
Absolutely.
We're always saying that division is there. And how do we get rid of it? How do we blur the lines between us and them?
And there are shepherds of the sheep who come along and try to make the distinction worse. You know, they tell you all about them and how terrible they are,
Right?
and how we are the ones. And that is ultimately what destroyed, absolutely destroyed, the whole project. I used to call, in Bible studies, I used to talk about the project of Israel. And my Bible study people didn't like that. It's a project of God. A project, meaning, here's the mission. Let's create a community of people who will live by faith. And because they live by faith, they'll be likely to be very hospitable. They will be generous. They will be interested in listening before they judge. All these things that would characterize a community of faith. And instead, they turned against each other, and they began to accuse each other of being the faithless prostitute. And both of them, the southern kingdom, went running to Egypt and asked Egypt and the God of Egypt to give them prosperity and defense and security. The nations to the north, they made friends with the Assyrians. Because the Assyrians said, you know what, come on in our alliance and we'll take good care of you.
I hear that voice today. I will protect you. I am
Yes.
your protector. You don't have to think about anything.
You will never have to worry about abortions because you have a life that you want to have 15 children.
Don't worry about getting sick or having a pregnancy that could end your life. We're not going to talk about that. But
Oh, and that was the whole discussion initially before Obamacare of healthcare. Like people trying to ring the bell and saying, do you know how many people have no health care? They have no option.
And even if they had money, a lot of people, because they had pre-existing conditions, would not get health care even if they had a lot of money. And that was, and people forget that that was part of the, private insurer's plan. And again, I saw on 60 Minutes, they do a good job sometimes. The insurers of properties in Florida, they were concentrating on. And after these big storms wipe everybody out, the adjuster comes in, usually somebody who's hired by the insurance company, an outside contractor. They go in and they make their report, and the report gets sent to the insurer, and somebody sitting at a desk in the insurance company, the one case was a couple that had over $300,000 worth of damage to their home. And when it came out of the insurance company, they got $15,000. And out of that came a deductible, so they got like $9,000 in the end. And the house is unlivable, and they're still paying the mortgage.
That's right, you gotta pay the
You're
mortgage.
still not paying
That's
the
right.
taxes, the mortgage, and the lady's out there mowing the lawn, but they're not living in the house. And it turned out that they thought the adjuster had robbed them. And they found out when somebody was able to contact this adjuster. He said he made 40-something claims, and out of all of them, there were only a couple that stayed with what he recommended. And all the rest, there were even others that had gotten gypped for more. And a lot of those people just lost their homes completely because, how do you deal with that? So I think it was some high muckety-muck in Florida jurisprudence said, oh, well, we'll come down hard on, have they? Well, that's when they mentioned the name of this company, I had never heard of it.
No, because I tried to find some property insurance, and they won't go for it.
So something's rotten in the whole system. That needs some thought, you know?
I think the person that invented the idea of pre-existing conditions was the devil himself. I mean, I really do.
Probably.
It's sinister.
It is.
It is sinister.
Who doesn't have a pre-existing condition? Back when they were making that point years ago, before ACA, somebody said they were not able to get insurance because they had ingrown toenails.
Yeah.
And the reason you would have to be looking for insurance could be as much as you change jobs.
Right, yeah.
I changed jobs. I went from one job to another, and the healthcare was provided by my job, so now I can change it. No, all of a sudden, you can't get health insurance.
Now, I couldn't, in the 90s, when we stopped working, and I was diabetic, and that was, there was no such thing as insurance if you didn't already have insurance. So we agreed to pay our former employee the insurance money until we got another, and I think by the time 3 years later that we started something else that you could get, it was no longer pre-existing. But, that not having health insurance is like, I can't imagine, it's millions of dollars. It's, people every day lose so much.
The Trump vision will be, we don't need all these regulations in government. That's stepping on the toes of the industry.
Right, we should have
So
learned a long time ago. Business would be our
So let's
friend.
go back to that. Really?
What?
I don't think people realize.
What century are you looking at to see that somehow, just trust mother business? It's not for your own best interest. It's just not going to be. And why should it be? They're going to look out for their own interests.
Exactly. Who can blame them? That's
And
the
who's
way
going
it
to
is.
fight them if the government is not willing to?
Exactly.
Who will
Sometimes
take
you
up?
need government.
Who will take up the cause? I mean, it's.
It just makes you fun.
Well, we certainly heard and dialogued with Jeremiah today. We'll have more to say along the way.
Jeremiah's got an uphill climb.
Yeah.
Any Jeremiah living, past, current.
Well, he doesn't give up. One thing Jeremiah doesn't do is he doesn't give up hope. And as intense as the suffering, he gets mocked a lot. Even by, the northern tribe and the southern tribe. You're no prophet of us. You're just trying to give us a hard time, make life hard. Why are you doing this? And he just holds on and says, in the long run, if you do not adopt the ways of God, Jehovah, the one and only God in the world, who created the world, you have no excuse because you heard this is what life is. But he persists. And he sees it as a way of demonstrating in his own life that he is a person of faith. Because he continues to believe that God will redeem and renew. Good for him.
Good for him.
I want to believe that too.
Absolutely.
A little rub off on us.
Yeah, we could use some of that now.
Courageous folks. Anyway.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here today for a good discussion.
I'm sorry it got so political the last few weeks, but we've been forced into that.
I'm not sorry.
Okay. I'm glad I'm not on my own.
I'm not sorry.
I always had optimism and faith,
Yeah.
but lately I'm getting rattled. I don't know.
Turn the TV off.
I know, but that's like putting your head in the sand. Which
Yeah,
way do you
well,
go?
guess what? Sometimes,
Sand is
Sand
good.
is good.
sometimes you need to just breathe.
I don't want to find out there's something I could have done or said.
Well,
or
what can you do when you watch it other than get angrier
it's true.
and more upset? If
And you watch
there's.
The Daily Show, and then you
Yeah,
laugh.
you learn
Okay,
that.
so
That you do.
watch the Daily Show. That is your mission.
Jon Stewart's not on every night.
That's the
No,
problem.
he's not, but the rest of them are pretty darn.
Yeah, they are. They actually really good.
Stephen Colbert is still there, you know, so.
Wait to call out, Leah.